The lecture will have 5 parts, I think, going from the introduction where we are living and how we are working into the first stage of developing our architectural language. Coop Himmelblau was founded in 1968, almost 52 years ago. And since then we developed our method from the very beginning of drawing a building model. This was the starting point, going to the idea that music can trigger the shapes as well, and from there to the space arm, and from there to the scanning process, up to the idea of artificial intelligence, which I would rather call architectural intelligence, not artificial intelligence, but architectural intelligence. Ich hoffe, das ist das. Number 1 is Coop Himmelblau in Vienna. Achtung, fertig? Thank you. I still think that architecture, at least our architecture, is the art of our century. Architecture is art because in every project is a little bit art, because you have to decide the appearance of the building. It's like a sculpture. Whether you suppress it by codes and rules or you open it up. When we started in 1968, almost 50 years ago, when we started, we said we have to change architecture radically and immediately. Why? This time in '68, architecture was really constrained by codes, rules, economic issues, the invisible part of the iceberg of architecture. We wanted to change that, and we created symbols for an open society. This was and still is our goal. Open society is following codes and rules, but it's at the same time liberating space. And people who are using this space feel liberated as well. This model here is maybe older than you guys are. It was done in 1968 and was a vision of apartment of the future. Same time, very iconographic model, meaning name is cloud. Platforms which can create different space situation. You can pack it in a container and drive it away. In all of our buildings, we integrate a little bit public space. Whether it will be used or not, doesn't matter, but it's there. And if people in 10 years maybe will asking for a public space, it's in the building. You know, I like clients who have an idea, who are innovative and young and dynamic. Not always say it's not possible, but in opposite, asking for a lot of urban program, which I like to do in a high-rise, to add values to the city by making a horizontal city. Yeah, so you can experience the city not only horizontal but vertical. So we are going now to the model shop. Number 2, chapter 2 is theory. A building only becomes architecture if it reaches the meta form of content, construction, or material. There is a word in German which describes form much better. It's called Gestalt. Gestalt is the synthesis of form and content. So all our shapes and forms are relating to the content or the context in a very stringent way, but always trying to make the next step. We are living now in a very uncertain times. We don't know what the future will bring us. We have to work on that. And I think the old structures are dying, but they are not dead yet. And the new structures are coming up, but they were not born yet. But by experimenting with new theories, with new methods, we can influence the upcoming new structures very well and can solve problems which we couldn't solve years ago. I have to say that the sustainability, it has 3 dimensions, not only ecology or economy, but the third and very, very important third level is Kunst, art, and social culture. Therefore, we will not allow art to be exiled from architecture. It's always art. I mentioned it before. Art is a very important part in our architectural process because we think that is the most important influence. Not only the politician can influence a society, but art and architecture can do it as well. So our key sentence is that everybody is right, but nothing is correct. If we go back to 1968, this was our first project. We called it an apartment building with movable platforms which can create different spatial situations. And by packing everything in a container, it could be built everywhere and temporarily. This is our work in 5 minutes. So the question is, what is architecture? And the answer is yes. No more explanation. That shows that we are working with different approaches to architecture. Not only the architectural language was interesting for us in the last couple of years, but also the surrounding fields, which is art, of course, music, philosophy, literature, education, everything was very interesting. More is interested than the history. Now, since I'm old enough, I show the references. We always had it in mind to favorite architects, which we really appreciated. And as you know, we are the co-founder of a very important architectural movement called deconstructivism, which is I would not explain it in detail because it would take too long, but it has to do with psychological issues in the design process, which I maybe can show it during the theory part of the lecture. Nowadays, can you see the arrow? Nowadays, architecture is only discussed in this visible part. I compare architecture and the resources of architecture with an iceberg. I say the visible part is only a little part, which is called architecture nowadays. It's only a little part of a big volume. The visible architecture is you can see at this part, which is not seen, you are not able to see it. It's called the invisible architecture, which is politic, economic, ecological issues, taste, codes, rules, and so forth, which are influencing the visible part a lot. And as you know, the invisible part is the more dangerous part, because I would like you to remind on the Titanic, which was sunk because she had a crash with the invisible part of this iceberg. So everyone agrees that this is architecture. And in the architectural history, everyone says, okay, this is architecture. But look at the program. The program is this white part of the big volume, the black part, which I would like to call architecture. If you try to do it nowadays, like they did building the pyramid, namely building a whole volume and only little spaces are usable, you will be fired. The client will fire you immediately. This is what I call cultural change in our profession. This image illustrates the situation we have to face every day. You see the client brief and the client budget, and we have to maneuver in between these two facts. Complex systems, and this is a very important thing, complex systems always causes complex problems, and you cannot solve complex problems with easy solutions. You have to find complex solutions. And as we know, complexity can be hardly explained. It's much easier to explain and communicate easier solutions, but easy solutions, simple solutions are never new. Complex solutions are always new. Like you can see on these two images. On the left side, a hunter following his goal, namely the animal he wants to hunt. And it's simpler to find the track on the sand than to find an airplane at the right time brings you to the right spot in an airport. An example how our society, let's say in Europe, changed. This is Michelangelo's painting in the Sixtine Chapel, Renaissance building. And how would he paint it nowadays, like this, or rather like this? Also gravity, since the mankind is in the outer space where the gravity doesn't exist anymore, the monocentric perspective in our architecture is obsolete. And not by chance. If you compare the sitting position on LC5, Le Corbusier's chair, with the sitting situation of the astronauts when they overcome gravity is the same. And this is not by chance. So what I said, in times like now, the monocentric perspective is becoming obsolete. So I'm going to the design philosophy and the method, how we developed our language in terms of architecture language. I have to say, without a model, a physical model, we cannot work on three-dimensional solutions. And I say only because architecture is a three-dimensional project, we can only speak in three dimensions to develop this solution. Now I'm to a title which is very important. In only 2 days, tomorrow will be yesterday. This shows in our times the acceleration of time we have to face. Going back to the very beginning, we said we made an analytic approach to the word entwurf, which means there is a combination of subconscious design. Entwurf means design, but the German language is much more precise in this case and refers to a subconscious procedure, and werfen comes from to throw. And the symbol for both of this is the jumping whale coming from the unconscious, the deep underwater, from a deep underwater, invisible situation up to the air. And in this moment, 30 tons can fly. So we were experimenting with drawings and model, and this is one of our key projects where I did the design for a house we were committed to build in San Francisco. We were talking about this project a long time, a month, but without thinking on spatial consequences. And I did this drawing with closed eyes in order to use my hand and the pen as the seismograph of the feeling I will build in this house when it's going to be built. Model was built very small. We measured the model and transplanted everything from the model into plans, as you can see, and a lot of lines and and energetic situations of the drawing are transplanted in a house which is creating a landscape, and the client should move in and decide afterwards where he wants to sleep and where he can read and where he can relax. And this is the project. And I have to tell you that there is no column in this project, only the tension columns I call. You can see it here. And this whole building, this beam is only rested on one point on this wall. This is what I meant when I say I don't like columns, because for me, the column is a system which indicates pressure. And since I'm going for liveliness in a building, I prefer the tension structures much more than a column. The same thing in this first built deconstructivist project. It was exhibited in the MoMA, and when we showed a model there, the American architects said, you will never build it. And I laughed a lot because it was under construction. The next step was that we tried to find other starting point than a drawing. And I'm very fond of music. And when we had a commission to create a temporary opera house, small pavilion, let's say it that way, we introduced music as a trigger point for the form. We made a lot of study that we have to increase the surface of the building in order to keep away the sound from the street. And since we had to dismantle the whole building after a certain time and recreate it the next year, we try to find multiple forms and shapes we can store easily. So we introduced two of my favorite music pieces. One is from Mozart, and the other one is Jimi Hendrix' Purple Haze. Mozart's Don Giovanni is the opera I like the most. And therefore we direction we used the Mozart Don Giovanni. The peaks increase the surface, which is swallowing the sound from the outside. Usually, opera building has to have, we always used thick material to create a good sound inside. In this case, we made the acoustics workable by keeping away the sound from the outside. Like I said, the form and the size of the peaks were created by Purple Haze, and the direction was created by Mozart's Don Giovanni.
Das geht ja schnell.
the project for extension of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And as I explained, it's a landmark for the guitar playing of Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones. A long time ago, in the late 80s, it was in the middle of the 80s, I saw how a movie studio in LA duplicated this beautiful sculpture of Nefertiti with the space arm. And I went there in '84 and met Frank Gehry, and they said, this studio is next to my studio, go over there and buy a space arm. This is what I did. And also I started teaching career at SCIAC in '84. I was teaching before on the AA and other schools, but SCIAC was the most important point of departure for my teaching. Space arm for the pavilion for a museum in Groningen. Every point was triggered and realized in a 3D model, and we did build the whole building in a shipyard because this was the most inexpensive way to create shapes and forms like that. The next step was that we made a sketch, of course, first time, and then we made a model, and we have this, scanned the whole model in many variations, and from there we built models and decided to realize it in wood. And this is the first free-form wood construction with no columns. It was milled by 3D and built like that. You can see the entrance to the exhibition space. It's basically a museum for bread and for everything which is connected in the creation process of making bread. It's like the Ark Noah. I don't know whether you know it in your culture, but this is an old Bible story when Noah was building a boat to survive a big wave in Europe. The next step will be, of course, the artificial intelligence, and I have to say, this image is from a friend of mine. Wolf Singer is a very famous brain researcher, and he said that the biggest computer is not close in making decisions that fast than a fly can do when she is moving around in a room. Deep Himmelblau. We put all our projects into the so-called Himmelblau universe. And the clouds become like that, and that reminds me when we said that architecture will be changeable like clouds. We are going for that in an experimental status right now. And even the drawing we are doing in the 3D space of our laptops, in this case, my laptop, we are making sketches. And from these sketches, we create spaces which will contain exhibition objects which are made in a big steelwork in Linz in Austria. It's called green steel because it is in a very ecological way. The production of the steel will be in a very ecological, so-called green way. It's built on piles for which were of an unfinished bridge. So the whole museum is in the, not the middle, but in the river. It's embedded in the river. The other thing we are working on is working on 3D files. When we are in the home office, the office can send me the model in the 3D file and I can work on the model at home. It's a little bit a replacement for my decision-making model, which I need to have in order to create it accurate to the goal of three-dimensional synthesis of form and content. This is a museum in Siberia, in Kemerovo, we are working on right now. And this is our Himmelblau universe. In this cloud, every project is implanted. And we can take out shape and ground plans or sections from every project and mingle it up and create a new interpretation of space and function. Every ground plan of all our buildings and sections of all our buildings are in this cloud. And this is the way we are working right now when we, the black spots shows when we implant this artificial intelligence answer to our problems. And it's funny, if we, this is one experiment, and look at the colors. They're coming right from a painting of Francis Bacon I saw a long time ago in a private gallery in New York. And this is an example for an upcoming design for a conference center. So this is our office. You can see a lot of laptops. Maybe in the long term, poor guys will be replaced by robots, but that will be not in the near future. Once again, architecture like clouds. Chapter 3, big projects in Europe, in USA, Russia, and Arabia. The central bank in Frankfurt, very complex project. We have to add this new building to a landmark, a German landmark of a market hall, which was a train station as well. And we combined both by taking the proportion of the old building and implant this proportion in our new design. The building, the office tower looks different from every side. This is the BMW building in Munich. It's called BMW World, but I think it's more than than a sales point. It is more than a sales point. It's a public space where people can not only see cars, which of course are the attraction, but also going in a theater, in a presentation hall, in shops, and at least 3 restaurants are housed in this building. The most related project to our project in China is Lyon, which is on a beautiful site in Lyon. It's called Musée des Confluences, which means museum where 2 rivers come together, the Rhone and the Saône. And it's a beautiful site. The entrance, the building, the lobby building is very important because the whole building you can walk through. The exhibition space, what you can see here is that we lifted up the whole building and people can walk from the city to the park at the very end of this peninsula. So if you want to see the exhibitions, all this 11 exhibition spaces are housed in the so-called cloud flying over the platform. And this column I like the most because it's more than just a column. In the middle of the lobby, there is a drop, a construction which is coming from the shape of the turbulences when 2 rivers come together. The entrance to the exhibition space is via the stair or the other thing. This is the 5th facade. If you are walking through the building, you come to a pond which cools the building because the wind is going over this water and goes into the building, supports the cooling of the building. And in the evening, there are a lot of lights, and the lights and the waves create patterns on the ceiling, which is the floor of the first floor of the exhibition space, this column. When I came to one day to this museum, I saw the handprints here on the column, and that reminds me on a French Stone Age cave where the people imprint their presence by printing the hand on the stone. The people from Lyon did it, the handprints on top of the metal of this column. It was not, let's say, not complicated to build, but it was very intense and consuming a lot of time to mount these prefab surfaces. And when I saw this, I thought we have to introduce new building method to make it faster and more economically like this. 2 men cladding the whole building or more. And we thought that we can use robots for doing this much more easier. And when we designed Mocape, we were investigating whether this is possible or not. And one of the Chinese company proposed it, but they were not taken, I don't know why. If you look at these little holes here and here, there are cameras to record the movement of the building on these columns, so that everyone can control whether there is when an earthquake is coming, whether this is danger or not. Yeah. This is a project we did in LA. It's a high school. The cone in the middle is the library, and the fly tower of the theater, which is designed as a sculpture, is extension of the meetings rooms, which the school can rent for the public. A museum, an extension of an existing museum, they call it very old, but it was done in the 1940, and we make the extension with a lobby and the exhibition spaces, and as a sign for the new content, the roof is reaching out into the street, so everyone can see that there is a very important point in the city. Convention center in Baku, with solar energy panels. And this is the project we are working on right now. It's under construction. It's in Sevastopol, a new opera house and a museum. This is the museum opposite of the opera house. And this is a recent one competition, invited competition international. It's a ice hockey arena for the World Championship in 3 years. What we did is we took elements of my favorite Russian architect, who was very important in 1930, THAD, and we took the dynamic construction of the THAD Tower and placed it here. This is the opera in Kemerovo, as you can see, in Siberia. Going back to the early beginning of our intention to design cities. This is the international winning project for Milan Sennar in 1980. Some around the beginning of the 80s, where we have to create a completely new city on the green field. Only the train station here was the point of departure of this development. And as we know, cities, if they are readable and livable, so to say, always has tension field in between two centers. Since this was a plan for 40 years, the development of the city for 40 years, this, of course, will be the center where the new forces will come out and allow the growing of the city. What we said in the first step, everyone will build in a low dense structures, and when the ground gets more valuable, they will build high dense structures. So our strategy was to introduce every 15 meters, because this was the law at the first 10 years, every 15 meters. If the people want to build higher, they have to introduce public spaces in the higher dense areas. You can read that where the low dense areas meets the high dense areas. Nowadays, we have much better tools to investigate the growing of the city. And this is a study where the energy lines, namely sun energy, wind, geothermal power, is creating a three-dimensional master plan for the upcoming development of this area. Climate was always in our mind. When we built this first high-rise in Vienna, which was more than 60 meters, we introduced a wind catcher, catching the wind to support the cooling of this house in the summertime. And this glass facade, which creates winter garden for the apartments, supporting the heating or in this winter time. Cooling, wind in the summertime, sun energy to support the heating in the winter time, as you can see. This is the diagram, how it works. Related to that is our plan for a vertical city in Melbourne, where everything comes together. This is shopping, education, and leisure time. And these are offices and the hotel, and these are apartments. And as you will see later on, there are parks in the middle where people can, kids can play. Schools, kindergarten are in these gaps here. Social housing in Vienna. We did this block. That's actually 1, 2, 3, 4 different buildings with a variety of ground plans for the apartments. I'm living there on top here. So I think I'm the first architect living in a house which he designed, because everyone said, no, don't do that, because everything, if something is wrong, the people here living here will complain to you every minute. No one until now was or is complaining. This is my penthouse here. I'm living here with my 3 kids. And the bridge is going from the house to the kindergarten. And this is a very special apartments for younger people. It's very, very nice to live here. Another project which is concerned with living and using tricks for climate and spatial sequences is district. We got a commission to design a district in Jeddah, in Saudi Arabia, and we studied the old Jeddah very carefully, and we found out how they, the old guys, quotation mark, in the 12th and 13th century, how they dealt with the wind and how they cooled the thing and how they make spatial sequences. Very interesting. But yeah, you can see it. It's not. This is not a high rise. It's about 8 stories high. It was the highest point we want to have in order to create a power situation in the, not in the basement, in the first floor and the public spaces. Very lively and very easy to build. In Mumbai, we got the commission to remodel a slum with all we know about energy, firstly energy, and to give the people there the possibility to get clean water, electricity, and the garbage transportation we considered, and all the infrastructural things. And as you can see, we did a wind study so that we can get the wind into the courtyards for the cooling systems. It's a very ecological project, but the old issues were transported in our contemporary times. Studies, and this was our proposal. The client, he is the investor, did it that way. He buys the land. The people who are living there are living while building this new structure out of the city in a camp, and then they can move back and living there for 15 years for free. Clean water, and the craftsmen have the possibility to work in these arcades. And these 2 towers are very expensive high-rises. In terms, the apartments, they are very expensive. And with this money, the client supports the poor people, giving the poor people a new possibility to live in a more hygienic environment. Now we are going to China. And where do we go? We go to Dalian, our first project, a build project in Dalian. In 4 years, we designed it and built it. The funny thing was that the client was as you know, the mayor was in Munich, and I got a call that the guy said the mayor of Dalian wants to have the same building like Munich in Dalian, and I was happy, and I thought it will be the same program. So, but bigger, maybe bigger. But it turns out that it has to be a conference center for the World Economic Meetings. Later on, when we had almost finished the plans, the mayor asked us, to turn that from a conference center into a cultural building. He wants to have an opera in the middle of the building. So what we did, we pushed out the conference spaces to get place for the big opera for 1,600 seats in the middle. And use these push-out things in order to create a so-called climate facade, which is controlling the light. Because we have daylight inside the building, because one reason was the energy system. Natural light is not tiring people, and we don't have to use electric energy to light up the building 24 hours. I don't want to show you the movie of the building, because you can visit it. This is the building, how when it was finished, and this is the climate system. The facade is shading the glass skin. You can have a look to the outside, and the wind is controlled, and the gaps are controlling the wind, supporting the cooling of the whole system. This is the energy design for the climate. As you can see, we are very concerned with climate issues, but I don't think that's so important for us. I think this is the regular craftsmanship of an architect, to be concerned to save energy. Or in the next step, the building should produce energy, and if we are doing that well and the client is paying for it, the buildings could be power plants for the surrounding as well. It's a little city, inside it's a little city. Not for your culture is a big space, but for us, 6,000 people are walking through can walk through the building, which is the size of a middle-sized city in Austria. In order to get the panels, which are metal as well, to give them a smooth surface, we painted the light tubes gold. And you can see how the sunlight and later the artificial light is coloring the surfaces of the cladding. The opera building, everything here is according to the acoustic issue, because that's very important, because they want to have in this theater not only Chinese opera, but also presentations for whatever. That's the opening. And in honor to the architect, they played a piece of Austrian music. I'm sitting here in Dalian. I don't know whether you know I'm standing in the inside of the Mukabe museum. No explanation what it is and what for it is. You know it, I'm sure. This is exhibition space for contemporary art, and this a reference to the house on the waterfall of Frank Lloyd Wright. This is the part where the planning exhibition could take place. These are then the diagrams of the urban proposal. This is the maximum volume we had to manage. But in order to turn the entrance to the subway station, we turned the whole volume around. Im Übrigen ist es genau Krems, aber long time ago. To turn it around so that people coming from the subway station, they can see immediately the entrance. This is the adaptation to the urban setbacks. We cut away these pieces. We make this corner round in order to respect the feng shui. And one of these ideas was, I think it was very important for us. We did it, we first investigated that in another project I'll show you later on. This is, we wanted to have the museum like a three-dimensional Chinese garden. This cloud in the middle, we call it communication cloud, in the middle of the whole building, houses information for the exhibition. I don't know how it works now, but it was planned to be an information center and a little tea house, and separates the two spaces, the exhibition space for art, and this is for the urban exhibition. Where does the cloud come from? You know, my favorite and sculpture in the art life is Brancusi. They call it Brancusi. The most important, most influential sculpture at the beginning of the 20th century in Europe. And this egg and cloud, we took and deformed it a little bit with its structures, and we did some investigation about form and function and about how we could control it. And this is how it ends up. As you can see, these are the visitors. It's rather large, but it gives this space a dynamic, fluid, spatial experience. I like that very much. Cleaning the motorcycle in the pond in front of the art museum. Very different materials. If you go there, you will see this is the south facade entrance, pond, shaded. And here you can see my favorite facade. This is the north facade. We can glaze it without covering it. Entrance. I always say that the first impression of a building you cannot repeat. Like always, you cannot repeat the first impression. It's very important to impress people or to give them the feeling what they can expect when they come close to the building. Of course, it's a reference to many other favorite architects. Borromini, for example, a very famous Renaissance architect in Italy in the Renaissance, and also Piranesi, which I adored when I was a young student. This is, you can read the reference to Frank Lloyd Wright's House on a Waterfall. And I like that since we are not able to fly, but in all our buildings, you can cruise through the space by using the ramps, the stairs, elevators, and so forth. You can have an overview from the bridges. It makes you feel more comfortable if you know where you are and if you know where you have to go to. Until now, it's our best work, I think. This is the dancing architect. And this was the moment where we tried to introduce building at least the cloud with robots. And we got a company, a proposal like that.
Charging our battery, and now we are full of energy. We are the robots. We are the robots. We are the robots. We are the robots. We're functioning automatic, and we are dancing mechanic. We are the robots. We are the robots. We are the robots. We are the robots. Я твой слуга, я твой работник. Я твой слуга, я твой работник. We are programmed just to do anything you want us to. We are the robots. We are the robots. We are the robots. We are the robots. Я твой слуга, я твой работник. Я твой слуга, я твой работник.
You know what? I show you the first project we did in China. It was 2002 when we were invited to compete with Saha in Guangzhou. And this was our opera building, designed for the opera building in Guangzhou, where we had the crazy ideas for the lobby because we said we should build a canal to the building and the OP, so you can come with the boat to the lobby of the theater. And this glass structure is the lobby, big lobby, and this lobby is a public space as well. The International Finance Forum in Guangzhou was also a competition. It was not only for us to develop a compact city with all the program, the given program, but we were also interested in to save the country and use the surrounding as a green space, sponge city we called it. So the concept was to save land by trying to house the program in a very compact building. And this park and funny thing is that in all our animations, there is a little side story. And I will show you, we cut it out for this presentation, but I show it to you in an extra piece. And look carefully how starts to jump. Comes out. Thank you. That's the end. Otherwise, it will take another hour.
Can we ask questions?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
So, yeah, could you please explain something more about your AI idea? That's quite amazing. From my point of view, always think it's kind of artificial intelligence, but to you, it's kind of architectural intelligence.
Yes.
So, to some extent, architecture is not always the avant-garde concept, always behind kind of trend for computing science or a lot more other science, even for engineering. But from your point, you address this kind of architectural intelligence. Could you explain something more on that? That's quite nice, that concept.
Yeah, what I would like to say, not the architecture and not the city is intelligent. You know, there are some words, they say intelligent city and intelligent architecture. It's not the architecture and not the city, it's the architect who is intelligent to create things.
Understood. The architect must be intelligent, yeah?
Yeah, of
Smart
course.
enough to deal with all.
And I have to say, you know, in our office, not the computer or the programs are ruling our design concept. We are using the computer and the artificial intelligence to as a tool to create new situations in architecture.
Yes, great.
And my friend Wolf Singer, who is a very famous brain competent for brain research, he says before we will have the tool, the artificial intelligence as a working and commanding tool, it will be more than one generation from here now. In other ways, if my dream is like following. My dream is that we get a commission to do an opera house. We get the new program into our computers, check it with our cosmos, the universe of Himmelblau, and then we go and in the next bar. The computer is doing everything. He's making ground plans, sections, and a model. Then after 2 weeks, we will come back and correct the whole thing. And then we connect this artificial intelligence co-worker with the BIM, the Building Information Modeling. And then we are going for 2 months holiday to the Maldives. And the computer is drawing the working plans and so forth. And then we come back and then we're writing the fee to the client and then we go to holidays again. I'm sorry to say that will not happen in the next 5 years. Yeah, but this is my dream. By the way, as you can see, I'm in Shenzhen now. Can you see that? I'm in the Mokabe Museum. So I'm wondering how the connection is so bad. Okay.
And also, that's not on the question, but on we just talk. And in your lecture, you mentioned about natürliche und künstliche Intelligenz, which also means you paid much attention to both nature and art. Could you please say something more on that? Yeah, that's quite interesting because from my point of view, I do think your architecture always kind of art piece. Yeah, so nature and art, intelligence. So could you please say something more on that?
Yeah, but I forgot to show you our most ecologically building we did. It's a conference center where everything is green. And the roof is covered with mushrooms in order to produce energy and so forth and so forth. Like I said, but the aesthetically issue is coming from other things than architecture, the conventional architecture. So if someone says, how does your building relate to the context of, let's say, a medieval city? I always say we respect if it's good architecture, we respect that very carefully. But as a society with much more knowledge about technical issues, building possibilities, we cannot and we should not repeat the old knowledge, but we can extend the old knowledge, and then therefore it looks differently. But it's related. Like in our church, we took the little church we did in my hometown. We took the curve of a medieval building, the roof of a medieval building, and created a new roof out of it by using the computer. So this is my relation to the existing building, the context. It does not want to destroy the old thing, but by doing new self-confidence, modern architecture, this will be a point of departure for a new development. You cannot, if you have a car like a Porsche or Ferrari, and you only drive with 5 miles per hour, this is not using the power and the possibilities of this car. We, as architects, have so many possibilities. If we use it, of course, the aesthetical approach or the outcome will be different. Like our kids are different, are learning different things by learning to deal with the computer than we did long time ago. When I was a student, I was drawing with a pencil and a ruler. No one does it nowadays. But the hand drawing is a tool going to the long-term memory, because digital lines and images, they don't go in the short, they only go in the short memory in our brain. Only the analog things are graving deeper impressions in your brain. And as long we can do that, we will do it. Using all these new methods as tools. If I say, okay, I cannot draw exactly how the wind influences a building. For instance, we are doing a building right now in Vienna where we studied the wind pressure in order to make balconies or open or more closed, and then where the sun is shining. So all these environmental things are more relevant now than, let's say, the old building next to the new building. This is a new approach to our and to your, of course, your dynamic society.
我觉得刚才这个演讲，非常全的对这个 PRIX 这个项目，设计和思想做了一个回顾和一个新的思考，而且这里面有很多项目也是第一次看到，特别是中国的这些项目我们也很熟悉，因为有些我们也是合作参与了一些竞赛啊，这里面的项目这里面项目有这个建成的，也有一些是一些构思它没有实施，这个我想起来。
Don't worry, I will translate it for you
Yes,
afterwards.
please. My Chinese is very good, but not that good.
他们问
No worries, no
worries. 那个，这是我就想起来一个，就是说到解构主义，当年在同时代的有一些人，比如说艾森曼或者说叫做海杜克啊，他们都是以这种并不以建成作为自己的目标，而是更多的强调一种纸上建筑，或者说觉得建筑的构思比建成建筑更重要。但是 Priest 的是这个设计和实践，可能比较强调了两个方面，既有因为这个建成是很困难的，因为它的很多建筑都是一种失重力的情况啊，顶上很大，下面很小啊。那么这种情况下，他怎么看待这种建成和非建成，或者说纸上建筑和这个建筑实际建造的关系？
I would say that our first name was Building Company Kooperative Himmelblau. The word building was later on together with Himmelblau and Himmelbau. You have to translate that, yeah?
Yes.
Bau Kooperative, when we were 26, when we started Himmelblau, then we always wanted to build because we thought, and I'm still thinking, that our competence is to create three-dimensional solution for a problem. I know where this paper architecture thinking is coming from. Firstly, I met Derrida like Eisman, and he said the same thing, what he said to Eisman, that not big buildings are important in the way of thinking, but a small piece on a paper could be more influential than a building. This is, I would say, a secondary issue in architecture. I think it's very important to create three-dimensional answers to questions. Otherwise, you are fixed in the ivory tower of theory. And what I can see on the schools now is that the students don't want to build because they say, this is too tough for me. I'm going to investigate the process of philosophy and the process of theory. I want to investigate. And I said, okay, the social problems are more important. I say, okay, you are on the wrong place. If you want to investigate philosophy, please study philosophy. If you want to be a computer freak, then please learn it like you have to learn to design. We architects are architects because we want to build. All the other things are excuses for not willing to prove whether your thinking is right. When I design a thing, I want to see it built, because then I can prove that my theory is not a theory on paper, but it's the reality, not the political reality, but the reality. the other way of explanation is that if you cut the head from the body, then you are dead. Meaning, if you're only thinking with your head and not experience a building with your whole appearance, meaning walking through, then you are dead. And this is the nowadays fashionable to talk about exhibitions theory, but this is still a dentismus. Derrida is a philosopher. He studied philosophy. Eisenman is dilettantic, being a philosopher. He is an architect, and I know how his work and his building could be greater if he would put more on. Nevertheless, Eisenman is a very important architect. Let's say it that way. Yeah, no misunderstanding. Yeah. But this is Tom Main is building, Moss is building, yeah, Saha was building, Lawton is building, Schumacher, and he is not. All these guys are not building in a theoretical way. Maybe they explain it a way because you know this is the Anglo-Saxon talk, and if you come to the house, you cannot recognize whether this building was meant when he was talking in a philosophic way. That is a great problem nowadays in the schools. They are more concerned with blah, blah, meaning, yeah, what do I know about social impacts in our society? I know a little bit, but this is not a theory. But what I know is how people are working in our buildings. And I want to experience that using our building. I want to experience that because then I prove that architecture is not only theory or whatever, concept, whatever.
就是说，我们觉得可能在中国或者在世界上，也有很多青年的建筑教师，更侧重于建筑理论研究，他对设计不够重视。我觉得他刚才这段话，对于真正的设计建筑师的角色，是一个很好的一个引起大家的思考。他刚才说的 Tom Main 是吧？我觉得也有一个，我之前有这么一句话 ，Tom Main 曾经说过他哈，就是说 Freaks 远远超过人工智能啊。这个话就是当然联想到现在，因为是一个疫情时期，我们很多人都在呼吁，或者说社会也越来越重视这种技术的发展，重视人工智能的发展，包括我们今天的会议，它也是通过一种技术的支撑才能实现的远程的会议啊，这种尖端的科技啊，人工智能的发展啊，机器的学习啊，大家觉得这些可能会代替人与人之间的这种近距离的，或者说弥补人与人之间不能近距离接触的这样的情况，甚至会代替人与人之间的这样的接触的可能，就是人工智能可能会超过人啊。当然，回到刚才说，他们说 Freaks 超过了人工智能，那他就是超人了，是吧？这个不知道他怎么看待这个人工智能和建筑师的关系。
I think there is a big misunderstanding in this philosophy of or theory of deconstructivist architecture, because they don't, the other way around. Derrida was a student of Freud, Sigmund Freud, who was the inventor of the psychoanalysis. Namely, he was concerned with our subconscious. And the one main point in Derrida's, I make it short, a long story short, Derrida's was proved on the basis on Freud. He proved that the subconscious in the creative process plays a great role. So he said that every piece of art, literature, painting, music, every piece has the so-called blind spot, meaning this is the spot where the poet, the musician, the composer, or the painter composed, write, or drawing unconsciously. And this blind spot rules the whole text, painting, or music piece. This is what Derrida, a long philosophy, very short. And we think because of Freud and our relation, Freud was Viennese, we are Vienna, and our relationship to this kind of psychoanalysis is more deeply than the Anglo-Saxon Saxon culture has in mind. So we thought if we can manage in a drawing or in the first sketch, we can, if we use our subconscious, we can liberate all these conditions which inhibit the space to be free. We can erase that, meaning we need the unconscious approach sometimes to liberate architecture from the condition of codes, rules, economic, blah, blah, political meaning. Of course, we have to bring that idea of a liberated space in reality, not political reality, not the reality of take the money and run, not in the sense of turbo-capitalistic issues, but in the sense like the old guys made churches, pyramids, temples, whatever. And if we can bring that and we can think about the apartment buildings, then we have, of course, thinking about the new living forms in the future. I just read that your country has the policy of more kids than just one. This will make an 3. I know, 3. No one wants to do it because it's too expensive to build bigger apartments. Yeah. So that has a big impact for the ground plan in an apartment house. The other thing is, we know here in Europe that in 10 years, building windows to the south side will heat a lot the apartments. So we have to invent new things. We have to invent buildings with only directing to north, or we have to invent shades, blah, blah, blah. So this is craftsmanship. This is craftsmanship. We did this since 1990, since the beginning. end of the 80s, beginning in 90, that we were concerned with wind and other things in a very, let's say, primitive way, because no one believed that. We had a project in Vienna with a facade and all these issues like wind turbines and all the other energy systems. And this, we proved it by calculation on the paper, yeah? We proved that this building is a power plant for the surrounding because it produces more energy than they need in this office tower. Do you know what they said to me? Such a nonsense we don't need. 92. Now everyone is talking about that. So this is fashionable. We call that greenwash. Everyone is doing trees on balconies, blah, blah, blah. Because the architecture is so banal and ugly that they have to cover these ugly things with poor green. You know, they're planting 1,000 trees. Do you know where the water is coming from? In the next 15 years, we will have problems with the water. I think maybe there will be war to get water for free people like now. And now we are planting trees, they are consuming a lot of water. I say we can convert heat into coolness by simple methods. So we don't need the tree. The tree is good, blah, blah. Birds and things. It's very, I have a terrace with a lot of trees because it's nice and I like the little birds. But it has nothing to do with, it's a kind of romanticism, and it's good that the kids see how the plants are growing. This is okay. But this is not the main point of architecture. What I always say to these guys, escaping from doing architecture into theory, I always say, this is telephone sex. It would be much better if I would sit there and we can talk, and it's much better. And it was very exhausting, this having interruption in this Zoom meeting. And it's it's eating concentration. I need much more for designing. Talk, I always say, yeah, human beings are not only the brain is very important, but we are living with all our body. And the fifth dimension in architecture is time, because we need time to walk and experience the space. And I tell you what, you are not only experience space by looking it, but also by hearing, and also in the back you can feel if the architecture is good, this is space. And this is not only in cultural buildings, this is not only in churches or operas, it's also in apartment buildings. Give them, also in Europe, I say, today, to an apartment building without a terrace or a balcony is a crime. And having, in our culture, yeah, having 3 people in 30 square meter is a crime. And a lot of divorces are coming because the people don't have their own room, their own things. You have to think about that. I don't need to be a scientist, a social experience, social expert. This is what I know as an architect. And You know, there are this, yeah, enough. The danger of artificial intelligence as a tool, as a political tool, is obvious. But I liked the artificial intelligence as a tool in medicine. Yeah. But to compare the eyes, yeah, I know if you go to the eye doctor, I have something, he makes a photograph and he can check it by millions and trillions of eyes and he can tell you why you don't see. Maybe he says, take off your sunglasses. Yeah, but it's, you know, I saw my twin babies in the stomach of my wife. Yeah, they can measure everything. This, yeah, it's true. That's fantastic. And you can make a surgery on a baby in the stomach of a pregnant woman. That's perfect. This is good. And we can develop facades where we can implant cooling systems, little cooling systems, yeah, in concrete. This is what we have to, they should do that in theory, but I have to say to develop that, this is not the task of an architect, this is the building industry. And the client should ask them, why are you 10 people working on a facade if a robot can do it in 1 hour and you need 10 days? This is what I think. And of course, young people have to experiment with all these things. This is what I meant. Maybe from 100 theories, one will be important.
Yeah, with that said, we think we are very happy that architects are not going to be replaced by AI forever.
Yeah, I did a post long time ago where I compared the tool of my father, a circle and a pen, with my tool. It's amazing. And I'm sure when he built buildings, actually, he was kind of craftsman architect in the 30s, yeah, 40s, later on 50s. He was a craftsman. All his buildings are still existing without a mistake, yeah, because he was concerned in craftsmen. If you do that, do a high-rise with only craftsmen. Good luck. The pressure of this so-called sustainability, meaning efficiency, is the death of space. And the next step could be like that. This is what I say to the young. If you are disappearing from your competence level, namely design entwerfen, yeah? Design three-dimensional experienceable spaces. If you let them open for investors or money makers or politicians alone, then it will happen like that. You will build blocks, nothing else, and then the user or the visitor of this city will get a goggle, and he can choose what he will see on this concrete cube. Baroque city, medieval city, whatever, yeah? and the investors will be happy because it's very cheap to build a block with Windows, blah. And then all these seemingly experienceable things you have as a virtual reality. This is telephone sex. Try the real one and say, what's the difference? This is my advice to students.
对，非常好，虚拟现实代替不了现实啊。
So the visual reality is never replacing our reality.
Oh, never.
我今天的交流的主题非常有意思，我们是叫做从这个屏幕上可以看到，这叫做从解构主义到人工智能啊。刚才对谈中也谈到了，就是人工智能是一个现在社会发展的一个很重要的，我们应该关注的一个技术手段和现象。但是人和人工智能永远是一个并行的关系，人可能是更重要的。我们也今天的会议也证明了这一点，可能面对面的交流比屏幕上的交流可能会更好。我们也期望着有一天有一个真正的疫情过去之后有一个真正的面对面的交流。感谢各位来参加这样一个网上的活动，也希望我们今天这样一个合作签约仪式之后，我们在中国共同有更好的项目和设计的实践，也希望把理论和实践落实得更好，也希望很快有面对面的实地的再一次交流。谢谢大家，我们今天的活动就到这儿，谢谢。
So thank you very much, Brix. I think we're gonna call it a day today.
Thank you. I hope to see you soon in person.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
What is thank you in Chinese? Lei?
谢谢。
谢谢。
Thank you very much. It was
Thank you.
a pleasure. Thanks.